For centuries, we've looked to nature for inspiration. But what if nature could be more than just inspiration? What if it could be the technology itself? As we search for sustainable ways to power our world, one of the most radical ideas isn't in a lab or a power plant. Nope, it's been glowing in the dark, just waiting for us all along. Just imagine this. You're walking through a city at night, not under the harsh, buzzing glare of electric streetlights, but beneath the soft, living glow of trees. Now, this isn't just about making things look pretty. This is a complete reimagining of our cities, a world where the energy grid is actually replaced by biology. And for a moment, this vision captivated just about everyone. For millions of us, this dream really clicked into place after watching the movie Avatar. The glowing forests of Pandora, they weren't just a stunning visual. They planted this powerful seed in our minds, a vision of a future woven directly into the fabric of nature. And suddenly, science fiction didn't feel so far from science fact anymore. But here's the thing, and this is what most people don't realize. This isn't just about replacing a light bulb. The potential impact of a world lit by nature is, well, it's truly staggering. It promises to solve some of the biggest crises we're facing today. Think about the ripple effect here. First, we replace all these power-hungry street lamps, which immediately slashes our reliance on fossil fuels. That living light is gentle, which means we get to reclaim our night sky from all that awful light pollution. And all the while, these are still trees, right? So they're actively pulling CO2 from the air, making our cities healthier, safer places to be. It's not one solution, it's a whole ecosystem of solutions packed into a single organism. So how on earth is this even possible? How did nature figure out how to create its own light? To really understand the dream, we've got to first understand the elegant science that's happening behind the glow. The whole phenomenon is called bioluminescence, and really it's just a remarkable chemical process that allows living things, from the fireflies in your backyard to those crazy-looking creatures in the deep ocean, to produce their own light. It is basically nature's perfect self-powered LED. And the recipe for this light is, believe it or not, beautifully simple. You need a molecule called luciferin, that's what actually makes the light. Then you need an enzyme, luciferase, which acts like the spark plug. Add a little oxygen and some cellular fuel, and boom, the luciferin oxidizes, releasing its energy not as heat, but as a cool, visible glow. Okay, so the science seems pretty clear, and the vision is incredibly compelling. So why aren't our cities already glowing? Well, this is where that simple, beautiful dream collides with a very complex reality. And it all starts with a story that completely captured the internet's imagination. Let's go back to 2013. A project called Glowing Plant pops up on Kickstarter, and it was like lightning in a bottle. It promised to use synthetic biology to create these amazing bioluminescent plants, and then ship the seeds directly to its backers. The idea just exploded, raising nearly $500,000 from thousands of people who wanted to hold this little piece of a future in their hands. But the project ran into trouble fast. The one-year deadline came and went. By 2015, the lead scientist had quit. Then in 2016, the company finally admitted their first big attempt was a total failure. The plants were duds, producing zero visible light. And to this day, that original promise is still unfulfilled, leaving all those backers in the dark, both literally and figuratively. And this reveals the first hidden truth of our story. As one of the backers, who happened to be a biology scholar, put it so perfectly, this stuff is not as easy as connecting Legos. The pitch sounded simple, right? Just pop some firefly genes into a plant. But the reality of engineering a whole functioning metabolic pathway into a complex organism, that is a monumental scientific challenge. But the technical failures, they were just the beginning. And this is where things get really interesting. The Glowing Plant project accidentally kicked open the door to a much deeper, much more contentious debate, one that really strikes at the heart of our relationship with nature itself. To understand this debate, you have to look at the technology. The conversation has moved on from the older GMO techniques, which often meant inserting foreign DNA and sparked a huge public backlash, to modern gene editing. This newer approach, it allows for incredibly precise little tweaks to a plant's own DNA. And that one distinction, as it turns out, makes a world of difference when it comes to public perception. When you start to peel back all the layers of the legal and ethical arguments, you find this vast and complex landscape. This is about so much more than just safety. It's about who owns the patents, who controls our food, and whether you and I have the right to know what's in our products. It pulls in everything from the integrity of organic farms to our very definition of what's natural. And right here, This detail changes everything. A deep dive into all the research reveals what people are most worried about. And guess what? It's not really the science. The biggest concerns are economic, corporate power, intellectual property, and who ultimately controls the market for seeds. And that is the second hidden truth. The fight over glowing plants is as much about profit and power as it is about biology. So, after a failed Kickstarter and a deep dive into an ethical minefield, is the dream of living light dead? Not at all. Not even close. In fact, despite all the setbacks, the science has kept marching forward and the future is starting to look bright all over again. Everybody, meet the firefly petunia. This was created by a company called LightBio, and it is not a concept or a failed promise. This is a real, commercially available bioluminescent plant. It's definitive proof that the core science actually works, and that those immense technical hurdles from the past, they're now being overcome. The dream is no longer a Kickstarter pledge. You can have it delivered right to your door. And this brings us full circle. The technology to create living light is, right now, in our hands. We are learning to write the code of life itself. So the question is no longer if we can do this, but how we should. As we stand here on this new frontier, ready to merge technology with biology, we have to decide, what kind of story do we want to tell?
Don't go anywhere, hit subscribe and we continue.
You know, we tend to think the future of medicine is being forged in these shiny, high-tech labs. But what if one of the biggest breakthroughs against aging and cancer wasn't invented at all? What if it was just discovered, perfected over millions of years by a creature living deep underground? For most of us, and for most species, the biological script is pretty predictable. But every now and then, nature produces an outlier, a creature that seems to be playing by a completely different set of rules, one with an almost uncanny resistance to the diseases and decay that get the rest of us. And that, right there, leads to a really powerful question. If we could figure out the source of that incredible resilience, could we actually borrow that biological blueprint? Could we apply it to our own health? All right, let's get into it. Our guide for this whole story is a small, kind of strange-looking rodent from East Africa, the naked mole rat. Now, it might not win any beauty contests, but from a biological standpoint, this animal is an absolute masterpiece of evolution. I mean, just look at this list of traits. They can live up to 41 years. That's about 10 times longer than a mouse of a similar size. They are remarkably cancer-proof. They're basically cold-blooded mammals who can survive for almost 20 minutes without any oxygen and don't feel certain kinds of pain. For scientists, an animal this unique isn't just an oddity. It's a treasure map to understanding how biological resilience really works. So the scientific detective work began. What exactly is the mechanism behind all these superpowers? The first few clues pointed inward, to how their cells behave. But, well, that wasn't the whole story. An early discovery found that their cells have this sort of hypersensitive anti-crowding system. If cells start getting too packed together, which can be a big red flag for a tumor, a gene called P16 just slams on the brakes and stops cell division. It's a really powerful anti-cancer defense, for sure, but it was clear something even bigger, something more fundamental was going on. And this is where the investigation took a really fascinating turn. The most critical piece of the puzzle wasn't found inside the cells at all. No, it was in the structural scaffolding that holds all the cells together, what's called the extracellular matrix. Now, right at the center of this matrix is a molecule you've probably heard of, maybe from skincare products, hyaluronic acid, or HA. It's key for giving our tissues structure and moisture. But here's what most people don't realize. Not all hyaluronic acid is created equal. And this one detail, it changes everything. It turns out that the biological effect of hyaluronic acid is dictated almost entirely by the length of its molecular chain. The size of the molecule literally determines its function. Look at how this works. As the HA chain gets longer, its biological signal completely flips. Shorter little fragments are actually inflammatory, and they can even tell cells to multiply. But the really long chains, they're anti-inflammatory and protective. It's like a biological switch that gets flipped by molecular weight. Let's break that down. The short chain stuff, low molecular weight HA, can actually promote inflammation and tumor growth. The long chain version, high molecular weight HA, does the complete opposite. It suppresses tumors, it calms inflammation, and it keeps tissues healthy. They're two sides of the very same coin. So the big question is, Just how different is the naked mole rat's HA? Well, the difference is absolutely staggering. In humans and in mice, HA's molecular weight maxes out around 2 million Daltons. But as you can see, the naked mole rat produces HA that is 5 to 6 times larger, coming in at a massive 6 to 12 million Dalton. Scientists have a name for this stuff: very high molecular mass HA. This supersized molecule creates this incredibly viscous, protective goo around the animal's cells, shielding them from the exact kinds of stress and damage that lead to aging and disease in other mammals. This discovery, of course, led scientists to ask a really profound question. Is this superpower transferable? What would happen if you could give the genetic machinery for making this supersized HA to another animal? Would it also get the benefits? The tool for the job is a specific gene called NMR-Has2. Now, all mammals have a version of this gene to make HA, but the naked mole rat's version has these unique quirks that make it insanely good at building these extra long protective chains. And that set the stage for a landmark experiment at the University of Rochester. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. Step 1, isolate that special gene from the naked mole rat. Step 2, insert it into the genome of a regular mouse. And step 3, sit back and watch what happens to the mouse's health and how long it lives. What they found was a powerful proof of principle. The results showed for the very first time that a unique longevity mechanism that evolved in one animal could be exported to another one and improve its health. And here it is, the key number from the study. The median lifespan of the mice carrying the naked mole rat gene went up by 4.4%. They literally lived longer, all from a single genetic upgrade borrowed from a completely different species. But it wasn't just about a longer life. The benefits went way beyond that. The modified mice had significantly better protection against cancer, both spontaneous and induced. They had less age-related inflammation all over their bodies. And even as they got old, they kept a healthier gut. So they weren't just living longer, they were living healthier. This is really a pivotal moment. It shifts this entire discovery from just a fascinating observation to a potential application. So what could borrowing this blueprint actually mean for human health? The lead researcher, Vera Gorbanova, put it really plainly. She said, "Our next goal is to transfer this benefit to humans." The path from this little underground rodent to our own medicine cabinets is now being actively mapped out. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean we're all going to be getting gene therapy from naked mole rats anytime soon. The more practical and immediate path is through medicine, developing drugs that can replicate the biological effects of having more of this protective, long-chain HA. And right now, there are 2 main strategies being explored. The first one is to develop drugs that slow down the natural breakdown of the healthy, long-chain HA we already make. The second is to find small molecules that can encourage our own genes to just produce more of it. Both of these paths hold a ton of promise for mimicking the naked mole rat's secret. So what's the big takeaway here? We've basically confirmed that a key to healthier aging can be found in the most unexpected places and then successfully transferred across species. It proves that nature has already done millions of years of R&D for us. And if this one quirky little creature holds such a powerful blueprint, it leaves you with a final, really inspiring question. What other secrets are out there just waiting to be discovered?
Don't go anywhere, hit subscribe and we continue.
You know, we're about to dive into one of the most ambitious scientific quests of our time. It's happening right now in labs all across the globe, and it could literally change the foundation of human civilization. And here's what most people don't realize. It all comes down to rewriting the ancient biological code hidden inside a single tiny grain of rice.
Okay, let's start with a number. 3.5 billion. That's nearly half of every single person on Earth. For them, rice isn't just part of a meal, it is the meal, it's survival. In a lot of countries, it makes up over 70% of a person's daily calories. I mean, it is, without any exaggeration, the single most important food for our entire species.
And yet, this life-sustaining crop has a secret, a deep biological flaw that makes it surprisingly vulnerable, especially with our climate changing so fast. And that hidden flaw? Well, that's what this whole story is about.
So, how can the world's most important crop also be one of its most inefficient? It's a real paradox. To get it, we have to pop the hood and look at the very engine that powers the plant itself.
And that engine, of course, is photosynthesis, that beautiful, miraculous process of turning sunlight into life. But the version of photosynthesis that rice uses, while to be blunt, It's kind of an old gas-guzzling model. It wastes a ton of energy.
See, in the plant world, there are basically two different operating systems for photosynthesis. Think of them as two different kinds of engines. Rice uses the older, much more common one. But over millions of years, evolution came up with a vastly superior model, a true upgrade.
And this is where the difference becomes crystal clear. On the left, you've got the standard C3 engine that's in rice. Its biggest problem is something called photorespiration. Just imagine an engine that, when it gets too hot, starts trying to burn oxygen instead of actual fuel. That's pretty much what rice does. It just wastes precious energy. But then on the right, you have the C4 engine, which you'll find in plants like corn. It's a turbocharged system. It has this incredible mechanism that pumps carbon dioxide right to the engine, making it super efficient even in really high heat.
So what's the secret to the C4's power? This is where things get really fascinating. It's not just some simple chemical tweak. It's a complete architectural redesign of the leaf. It's called Cron's anatomy. This special structure builds a tiny pressurized CO2-rich chamber right around the photosynthetic engine, which shields it from all that wasteful oxygen. It's truly a masterpiece of biological engineering.
And that brings us to the really big idea, the dream. What if scientists could take that old, inefficient engine out of rice and drop in that high-performance turbocharged C4 engine? This, right here, is the C4 rice dream.
And the payoff? Oh, it would be absolutely staggering. We're talking about a potential yield increase of over 50%. Imagine rice that needs less water, needs less fertilizer, and actually thrives in the hotter temperatures our planet is facing. This isn't just about growing a bit more food. This is about creating a crop that's resilient enough to feed the world as the climate continues to change. Now let's be totally clear. This is a moonshot. We're talking about a project of enormous scale and complexity. It's brought together top researchers from institutions all around the world, all laser-focused on this one monumental goal. But just like any true moonshot, the path is filled with massive obstacles. And they aren't just biological. They're deeply ethical, and they really touch on the future of our entire food system. You see, this isn't as simple as just dropping a few C4 genes into rice and calling it a day. To make the new engine work, scientists have to completely re-engineer the plant's fundamental anatomy. They have to build that specialized cran structure from scratch. So this is less like a simple engine swap and more like redesigning an entirely new car from the ground up.
And this right here leads to maybe the most profound question of all. As we get closer and closer to unlocking this incredible power, who's going to control it? Research, like this quote points out, highlights a major fear that this life-saving technology could get locked up behind patents, controlled by just a handful of corporations, and never actually reach the people who need it the most.
And to really get the stakes, all you have to do is look at history. Back in the 60s, during the Green Revolution, it was publicly funded research that created new, high-yield rice varieties. And the result? The price of rice plummeted, and it lifted millions of people out of poverty. It was a massive victory for public science.
Which, of course, forces us to ask this critical question. Is this C4 revolution going to follow that same path and be treated as a public good for all of humanity? Or will it become just another proprietary product, making the gap between the haves and the have-nots even wider?
And beyond the question of ownership, there's a whole minefield of other social hurdles. You've got the never-ending public debate about GMOs, the massive logistical challenge of just getting these seeds to millions of small farmers, the unbelievably complex web of international patent law, and on top of all of that, the absolute necessity of building public trust every single step of the way.
So, this brings us to where we stand today. We're at a crossroads where this incredible scientific potential is meeting a really profound choice about what kind of future we want to build.
On the one hand, C4 rice represents one of our absolute best hopes for solving two of the biggest challenges of our time, feeding a growing population on a warming planet. The science is pointing the way. A viable path is emerging.
But on the other hand, its very creation forces a global conversation. It's not enough to just ask if we can do it. We have to ask how we should do it, who gets to benefit, and what principles are going to guide us. The technology itself is neutral, but the way we decide to use it is anything but.
And so, we're left with this. The science to completely re-engineer our planet's most important food source is almost within our grasp. We might soon have the power to build a world that's free from hunger. But you know, the technology itself is the easy part compared to the real challenge, building a future that isn't just fed, but is also fair. And that isn't a test of our science, it's a test of our humanity. The question isn't just, can we do this? But if we do, who do we become?
Thanks for watching. Support BioVellum by liking, subscribing, and sharing. Let's explore the secrets of nature together.